So again, good morning. My name is Nick Marcarelli. I'm with Shadowsoft. We're excited to have everyone here today. We're going to talk about Azure Red Hat OpenShift and how that could be a compelling solution for your organization. It's going to be a lot of information, and we're going to run through it in a level of detail that you can get a comprehensive view. So if you have any questions, what we're going to ask you to do is feel free to send it over the chat. And as we're going to run through the presentation, hit the high points, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. Some other logistics that you may need to know about if you've joined this meeting and you are a prospect customer, we are providing lunch as we stated in the invite. KC will be sending DoorDash certificates out to your email, so keep an eye out for that. That'll be coming in the next few minutes. And so yeah, Q&A at the end, and then feel free to submit those questions whenever you have them, right? And we'll run through the transcript and do that. We do have slides. We also have a video. We will have the link available if you have any connection issues. But it should syndicate just fine through the Zoom meeting. We've tested it a number of times, so hopefully no issues there. And we'll go ahead and get started. Grant, if you could go to slide 2. So just quick introduction. We're Shadowsoft. Grant and I will introduce ourselves in more detail in a second, but we're a Kubernetes and cloud system integrator. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. We've been partnered with Red Hat since our existence in 2008. They are a very strategic partner in our portfolio. We're helping customers that range from the mid-market up into the enterprise around Kubernetes strategy, automation, public cloud. But today we're specifically going to talk about OpenShift on Azure and that offering and how that'd be relevant to you. Next slide, please. And just like any other thing, I'm going to plug a couple of things that I'd love you guys to use as a resource. We host a podcast that's sponsored by Red Hat. It's the Application Modernization Podcast. I'm actually your host. Just to give you a feel for what it is, I'm basically talking to folks in industry that are building software, building teams, and we're talking about their journey. So it's not a deep technical dive. It's really around best practices and storytelling of successes and failures. I think it's pretty good. I think you should check it out. It's available on all of the ways that you would stream a podcast today. So check that out if you would. Next slide, please. So quick introductions. I'll introduce myself, Nick Marcarelli. I'm one of the principals here at Shadowsoft. I'm in charge of caring for our engineering practice around solutioning of technologies and our business operations. So I'm working day-to-day with our customers, day-to-day with our engineering team to provide compelling offerings and help people get where they want to go. And then Grant, I will pitch it over to you to introduce yourself.
Hey guys, my name is Grant Dellavecchia. I'm a consultant here at Shadowsoft. I was a Red Hat solution architect for the last 7 years, working in the North America commercial sales team. And so most of my background and experience is with Red Hat products, in particular things like OpenShift and Ansible, all the rest of that kind of stuff, most of the Red Hat solution portfolio. And so with Shadowsoft, I work with Nick and the rest of the team to come up with long-term holistic kind of solutions for customers. And also I do delivery and actual consulting as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Grant. You can go to the next one. So just a couple of highlights before we get into the meat of the discussion, the presentation around this. So at Shadowsoft, we have a perspective around OpenShift and a perspective around Kubernetes in general. And this is something we've been working on for a few years. And we really see Kubernetes and OpenShift in this context as a collection of components that you have to address along the way. So obviously standing up clusters, configuring them, moving workloads over, but we really see these 4 areas as important points of emphasis. We would say there's probably 10 to 12 areas holistically if you went through an assessment of what you're doing with OpenShift, but how are you integrating with cloud services? What are your deployment pipelines look like? Are you using deployment pipelines? Do you have existing today that need to integrate in? Monitoring observability is actually an area where I think a lot of customers are really looking for better answers. So that's something we spend a lot of time helping customers, achieve observability to be able to locate trends and make sure they're staying on top of the workloads. And then obviously security. And this is probably the most movement happy sector around Kubernetes. There's lots of offerings, lots of new things, lots of cool tools, and security is top of mind for all organizations, but there's lots of options and lots of things from a roadmap perspective to wade through. Next slide, please. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to highlight the unique advantage of ARO. That's what this is about. We're going to show you a video of a quick deployment of ARO to kind of just exemplify how easy it can be. And then we're going to wrap up with showing you an overview of an offering that Shadowsoft has, which is called the Kubernetes Center of Excellence. And I won't steal any thunder from that. We'll dive into that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So a couple things about the Red Hat Microsoft relationship. Microsoft is in most organizations, in a big way. Obviously, starting with their desktop and application related services. So it's really great that Red Hat and Microsoft have forced this partnership a number of years ago, where they're collaborating and not really competing, right? So Microsoft's been an excellent partner in the Red Hat ecosystem, and that started with Enterprise Linux and is continuing on with OpenShift on Azure. Next slide, please.
Sorry.
There we go. No, you're good.
Doing 2 things at once.
So, in the same vein, Red Hat has tremendous success, specifically in these industries and other industries as well, other verticals, capturing, the global Fortune 500. And I think that really says something. Microsoft is, working in these accounts, and Red Hat is working in these accounts. And that combination of these specific software providers can really provide a huge benefit when you have a combined solution like ARO. Next slide, please. And I kind of touched on a few of these things already, but Red Hat and Microsoft have been collaborating for a number of years, formally dating back to 2015. So, Azure Red Hat OpenShift is really the latest example of that, but obviously started with Enterprise Linux back in the day. As Microsoft continues to grow with their Azure footprint as a hyperscaler, we see that relationship, that alliance between the two companies as a strength going forward for customers. Next slide, please. And this is why this type of offering may make sense for your organization. They're trusted organizations. They have an integrated solution. Azure and OpenShift is an integrated solution, truly. It has thought of all the things that might be challenging with starting your Kubernetes journey. So it's really a great place to get started and get started quickly. And Grant is going to highlight that. The collaborative support element, that is a big challenge, I think, when you have alliances between technology vendors. Microsoft and Red Hat do a great job around co-engineering and co-supporting this offering. and that will pay dividends. It's not just, yes, our stuff is certified and works with each other. It's we are mutually invested in what this looks like. And I think that is my last slide. Yeah, pitch it over to you, Grant.
Okay. So this is just some things for you guys to consider. What are your top priorities for your organization? And we're talking about moving forward, right? So what is the future of your organization when it comes to your goals internally? Are you looking to bring innovation to a market faster? Do you need to create more flexibility and agility in your business development models so that you can accommodate whatever the newest things are and bring better applications to your customers and all the rest of that stuff? Just kind of, what is your top priority? Because that matters in the whole Kubernetes world, right? Moving forward from where you are today into the next phase, what is that, right? So one thing that we have all learned the last 18 months or so of operating in a pandemic, things are different now, right? And we could talk for hours about why and how things are different, but they're different. So it's time to really consider some newer ideas and how to achieve them. So with that, what is blocking you from reaching your goals, right? Most of the time when we talk to customers, it ends up being a time and resource issues. They don't have time to focus on their applications or on new applications because they're too busy keeping the lights on, right? Running the business. And this is where, we can step in and help address this for, our customers. We give you the opportunity to focus your energy and your products on what your customers need, not necessarily on running platforms, right? So the other thing that a lot of customers really struggle with is legacy architecture, or what we refer to as technical debt. And this is, anybody who's on the phone probably realizes that, you've been pushing this stuff around forever. These are the older applications. These are things that are tied to particular pieces of hardware, let's say a Solaris box or, AIX machine or, something like that. And what do we do with these applications, right? How do we move them forward into, the new century to be cloud enabled or, allow us to move faster? So that's a particular challenge. And next is the complexity of integrations and implementations. All of this container stuff is complicated. There are a lot of bits and pieces. And at the end of the day, we just want great applications for our customers, right? Whoever these may be. And therefore, it requires a lot more complexity when the implementations come in, particularly in a cloud-based environment. So one of the things that OpenShift and Microsoft or Azure provide is a development and unified operations system, right? One of the things we talk about a lot is open hybrid cloud. That's Red Hat is moving towards this direction. IBM is moving towards this direction. They are all in on the open hybrid cloud model. And generally what we refer to, or what we're talking about is the three pillars, right? So we have hybrid applications, and these are, enterprise customers that have to manage a collection of applications and services. And these are, custom built, they're cloud native, they're ISVs, wherever these applications come from. The next step is the hybrid infrastructure. So enterprises now have to run across a hybrid infrastructure, including data centers, public clouds, they're doing edge locations, whatever particularly works or you need in your environment. The other issue is the skills, right? The processes and the culture of your organization. So organizations have to have a very diverse team with different skill sets that understand how to do all of this stuff, but also how to do it all in the cloud, right? So one thing that we have found in the last several years is that Kubernetes is not necessarily easy to do right. So it's not difficult to download and install Kubernetes. Anybody can do it. Anyone who has a half an hour can download and install Kubernetes and get it up and running on a server. That's not the difficult part. The difficult part is making your infrastructure extend into the Kubernetes environment. So let's take something like networking or storage, for example. Due to the ephemeral nature of Kubernetes, your network and storage subsystems also need to be capable of functioning in an ephemeral capacity. Well, how does that work, right? Networking and storage are not ephemeral at all by nature. So how do you do that, right? How do you make that functionality become available inside Kubernetes? This is a significant stumbling block for most customers. They get out there, they start doing it, then they start to realize, oh, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. And Kubernetes is only one part. It's the orchestration component to containers. It's only one piece. It does a lot in that piece, but it's only the one piece. It doesn't do anything for network or storage or security or a whole laundry list of things that Kubernetes just doesn't do. It doesn't do it at all. And this is where what I refer to as the wrappers come in. So things like OpenShift, things like Rancher, things like other, manufacturers out there or vendors out there that come up with a wrapper that goes around Kubernetes. And this is where we extend the functionality of Kubernetes. Another thing to consider, something like security. If you want to run Kubernetes, you're going to have to give Kubernetes access to your internal systems. Which means that now, your security has to extend to the Kubernetes environment. And when you're running just naked Kubernetes, you have to do that, or somebody has to do that, right? You have to integrate Kubernetes into your security system, your whatever software plans or packages or whatever you're using in your environment. And that's going to be up to you, unless, of course, your vendor, has some type of integration and stuff like that. But again, you're on your own there. Same thing with monitoring. Nick was mentioning this before, monitoring and alerting. That the capacity is there for all this stuff to happen, but you have to do it. Kubernetes doesn't do this for you, right? So I think that as customers go along, they start to realize that this is the difficulty with Kubernetes, is all this stuff that you didn't deal with before because you already have networking and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So this is where OpenShift comes in and manages a lot of this stuff for you, or comes up with the facilities, right? So, we have two things, day one management, and then we have day two management. So day one management, that's, getting it in, getting it set up, getting it configured, all the rest of that stuff. Yes, okay, we take care of that. We'll show you a video how that happens. And then we have day two management, which is installs and upgrades and, keeping the environment up to date. OpenShift and Microsoft help you with that as well with the ARO offering. The third is application development and management. And this is where OpenShift really comes into play because it's all about developers with OpenShift. Red Hat is investing significantly in automation capabilities of OpenShift, things like the CI/CD pipelines with Tecton or OpenShift pipelines, the ability to do multiple types of deployment, whether that be A/B testing or Canary or however you want to do your deployment rollouts, things like developer tools and code-ready workspaces. I don't know if any of you guys are aware of code-ready workspaces. I just want to take a little aside because I've been playing with them personally over the last couple of weeks, and they're pretty cool. I'll give you the short. A developer can download an OpenShift node to their desktop or their laptop or whatever and run their code in your OpenShift environment that's on their local computer. You do all your development, make sure everything works, and then when you deploy to your OpenShift environment, it works because you're developed on the actual environment that you're going to be running your code on. It's for any of you guys who know in the development process and have done work with that, trying to emulate environments for your developers, it's a challenge. This is a really cool thing. I wish we had this. I wish we had these forever, right? That would have been really cool to have developers actually developing on the platform on their laptop that it's going to be running their code in. So the other things is the cloud native frameworks, including Spring and serverless Windows containers. And really it's, to inspire developers to do whatever they need to do, use whatever languages, use whatever best tools you can to come up with the value for the customers. All right, so again, we're back to the value of Red Hat OpenShift. It is a complete platform. Okay, what I was talking about with the Kubernetes and a couple of slides backwards, the Kubernetes is one piece. As you can see from this diagram, you have the physical world at the very bottom, which is your physical, virtual, private cloud, public cloud edge. It doesn't matter where you want to run OpenShift, it runs everywhere. Okay, on top of OpenShift is Linux. In this particular situation with OpenShift, it's RHEL, or more importantly, CoreOS, but nonetheless, it's a RHEL product. On top of that is Kubernetes and all Kubernetes functionality. On top of that is Red Hat's OpenShift Kubernetes cluster services, right? So these are going to be things like over-the-air updates, the networking layers, your ingress, your storage, your service mesh layers, your registries, all the stuff that you need, the operators, everything you need to run a successful OpenShift environment, okay? Yeah. The scaling application. So this is something that, a lot of people are used to coming from a virtualization environment. And, virtualization, you have a density ratio of, 50, 60 virtual machines per host or something to that effect. With OpenShift, and particularly containers, when you've developed it appropriately, your container platform scales ridiculously. The functionality behind what one cluster can do, you could run thousands or tens of thousands of containers or applications on the same cluster that you would take, you'd be able to run, 200 or 300 virtual machines on. So it does a lot more with its resources. And this is just containers in general, right? So that's something else to keep in mind, that not only is Kubernetes new, but how you run it and how you do all the stuff with it is also very different. All right, we're going to talk about that in detail, or a little bit more detail later on as well. So delivering applications faster is really kind of the key to the whole idea behind ARO, which is Azure Red Hat OpenShift, okay? Developers want to be productive without being bogged down by infrastructure concerns, right? How long does it take to get a virtual machine? How long does it take to get your thing? So with OpenShift, it helps them focus on what matters, right? It allows them to provision self-service, on-demand stacks of software, services, whatever it is they need. They use the built-in CI/CD tools that are built into OpenShift so that they can deploy faster. The whole point is to deploy faster. Operators want secure, efficient, and controlled processes with regulatory compliance. OpenShift helps you do that. You can create clusters in minutes. You can control users and project access. You can automate operations. So even though a developer is building an environment, it's going to be an environment that whoever has decided what your environments need to contain and consist of, it's already done. They push a button, they deploy what they need to deploy. It's already got all the security, it's already got the controls in place. There is no concern moving forward with allowing the developers to use whatever tools and environments they need. And you don't require the operations team to sit there and evaluate and look at, and you don't have to go back through security methods and that stuff, because it's already done inside of OpenShift. And every time you do it, you just get deployed the same environment over and over and over again. Business outcomes, faster time to value. We want to empower developer productivity. We want to deploy applications in minutes and quickly scale across all needed clouds and geographies. Okay. With Azure Red Hat OpenShift, you have fully managed clusters available in minutes. We've seen a 90% increase in developer productivities, and the simplified deployment process with proactive management from the experts who manage the environment, who are always there paying attention and managing the infrastructure and all the rest of that kind of stuff. It offers reduced complexity due to the fully managed OpenShift and application services. The flexible consumption-based pricing model, monitoring, logging, networking, everything is included behind there. And of course, you have an enterprise-grade operations and security team who's managing your quote-unquote data center, right? These are some of the features. Obviously, I'm not going to read this stuff. You can read the slides. But these are some of the features that you really get with Azure and OpenShift. And really what the kind of key takeaways are from stuff like this is flexibility and agility. These are the things that I've been in operations for internet facing applications and world stuff like that for the last 30 years. Flexibility and agility has always been, kind of the Achilles heel in the infrastructure world. We can't move fast enough to allow the developers. Azure Red Hat OpenShift addresses that with providing the flexibility and the agility to do the things that you need to do. Kind of the key takeaways from this particular slide are going to be the managed clusters are going to be available in minutes, and we'll show you this. I mean, minutes. It takes about 35, 40 minutes from no Azure Red Hat OpenShift environment to an Azure Red Hat OpenShift environment that can be used, up and running. Not necessarily perfectly configured for your custom environment. There's work that needs to be done after the fact, but this is what you end up with, is a fully functional working environment in really just minutes. You don't have to build any virtual machines. You don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. You'll see how it goes when we go through the little video aspect. If you were to run your own OpenShift cluster in Azure or anywhere else for that matter, this slide kind of breaks down where you're responsible for managing. And as you can see, the only thing that you get in running it yourself is platform support. So Microsoft and Azure will manage the platform. You are responsible for everything else. OpenShift will deploy into the environment and build all the stuff that it needs to do due to its automated installation process. It's very nice and easy, but you are responsible for the rest of the environment. If you run ARO, now you can see the difference between what you're responsible for and what they're responsible for. And as you can see, you're only responsible for really the end user experience, right? So you manage your projects and quotas, you manage your own users, and you manage your own users' responsibilities and so on and so forth, right? So it definitely simplifies the management and the everyday kind of usability of your OpenShift environment, which is something that you don't really need to worry about. And the other big advantage is, of course, scale on demand and pay as you go. When I say scale on demand, if you build out an OpenShift environment, let's say you have 10 worker nodes, and something's happening in your environment, and you guys are running a big sale or big marketing push or something to that effect, and all of a sudden the load starts to go up. OpenShift, if you allow it, if you tell it it's okay, will automatically spin up additional worker nodes and move your applications. Kubernetes will move your applications and scale them across those additional nodes. And then when the load goes away, OpenShift will turn those nodes off. So this is the scale on demand aspect. This is the whole point behind microservices, is to scale in the environments or in the areas that you need to scale in, not just building additional machines because you need one part, right? And the pay-as-you-go model, you use those resources, and when you turn those resources off, you're not paying for them anymore, right? So it literally allows you to burst. The idea behind bursting into the cloud, which we've been talking about for years, but wasn't necessarily easy to do. ARO makes this possible. It makes it feasible, like practically. That's, for me, that's kind of exciting. These are things I've been trying to achieve for most of my career, right? All right, so let's talk, what exactly do we mean by managed? All right, so we have day one, build, deploy, and configure, right? So with ARO, you get a fully managed installation and the initial configuration to get the clusters running in under an hour. Self-service dashboard for creating and managing the clusters. Now, what is day two? Management of day two operations relieves operational burdens and responsibilities. So managing the versioning and maintenance for the masters, the infrastructure, the worker nodes, the additional services, CI/CD logging metrics, upgrading and updating process is automatic without you having to do anything. the proactive monitoring aspect for the entire cluster, the patches to all the systems and everything that's in there. Now, we're not talking about your applications, that's your responsibility, but everything from there down, it's all managed for you, right? You don't have to worry about it. It will get handled via OpenShift and Microsoft. Easy peasy. All right. Again, we're going to come back to deploying faster. As you can see, this is kind of a theme within this presentation here. We want you to deploy faster. Deploying faster means moving faster. It means giving the businesses what they want. It means giving the customers what they want. And it allows iterative programming. So your applications and your services that you're providing to your customers, they incrementally increase functionality and provide additional value to your customers much more quickly, much more easily. The systems allow you to reduce operational cost. Generally, we often find that most organizations don't take into account the cost of acquiring and managing. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, good. I just got a notification on my screen that something has changed, so I wanted to make sure y'all can still hear me. Okay, good. So anyway, we often find that organizations don't take into account the actual cost to acquire and manage the tools to fully run their Kubernetes, things like monitoring, logging, metrics, pipeline support. And this doesn't even touch onto the resources that you need to support Kubernetes, people, right? Your own staff and that kind of stuff. So we are seeing customers saving up to and over 60% using managed OpenShift versus, let's say, just a managed Kubernetes service or something to that effect. And of course, this would be vary for your own, use cases and so on and so forth. The other thing we find is a reduction in developer wait times. So developers aren't sitting around waiting for their environments to be available, to get the new version of PHP or the new Java engine or whatever they're waiting for. They're not waiting for that. They click a button, they get what they need, okay? All of this translates into operational efficiency, right? So we have seen customers, I personally have seen customers who have implemented OpenShift into their environment, and simply the operational efficiency of their operations staff has gone through the roof. Right now, their operations staff is not spending all of their time doing mundane tasks. They're actually working on the infrastructure. They're actually fixing problems because they're not deploying virtual machines for developers, 50 times a day so that they can try the new things or whatever and whatnot. So the operational efficiency, the reduction in cost is tremendous with the OpenShift container platform, the entire stack key. So again, we have a fully managed infrastructure, consistent OpenShift experience across the hybrid cloud, and we'll talk about this a little bit in a future, couple more slides about what that means across the hybrid cloud, and a complete management platform. And then of course with ARO, jointly managed and engineered between Microsoft and Red Hat. Faster time to value. Always, always, always fastest time to value. Because you can have the clusters available in minutes, we've seen increases in developer productivity. Obviously, these numbers are all over the place as far as what they are. I believe there's a link down there at the bottom to a total economic impact from Forrester from 2019. Interesting read if you're all inclined to do so. And with OpenShift, developers really appreciate OpenShift, again, because it empowers them to do what needs to be done, right? So organizations need to have deploy their applications more quickly and seamlessly so they can get their products and services into the hands of their customers faster, right? Organizations want to adopt the new technologies, but they don't necessarily have the bandwidth to learn and implement and manage these services, right? It's not just the developer has to learn the new language, but the operations team has to go through and figure out what they need to do to manage that as well. It requires expert management and proactive responses along with simplifying deployments. Gives the teams your time to focus on the things that really matter to them, right? So again, it's going to come back to flexibility and agility, which I keep trying to drive these points. This is the big value that OpenShift and ARO bring to your organization. This is a little looping video here of the command to create ARO. This is it. What you see on this screen right here, that's what you type in, and that's what happens. And we're gonna come and look at this in just a few more slides. We have a video that we're gonna watch over there. These are some of the things that we're talking about, the benefits. We've already talked about that. We'll skip this. So OpenShift offers what we call the developer console, right? So what we have in the developer console is a specific environment that's based on the project. So you have a developer, and let's say he's associated with 3 projects, which would be, let's say, applications in your particular environment. And it gives them the opportunity to see. So what you're looking at right here on the screen is the developer portal, looking at the ADEV Console 1 project, and they can see all the applications in there. It's very streamlined. It's very specific to what the developer needs to see. There's also an administrator console, which looks totally different and gives more information for the administrators to see and manage inside the environment. Code-ready workspaces. These things are awesome. Y'all have to take a look at it. I think your developers are going to love them. OpenShift ODO, which is an advanced developer command line interface. And then, of course, the plugins. I don't know if you guys, how many of you have experience with Visual Code Studio? Visual Code Studio, very awesome. Plugins directly into OpenShift. It's another one of those tools that you've got to look at. Even if you're not a developer, I know that I use it for myself for writing Ansible playbooks or just editing YAML in forever, because that seems to be what we're all stuck in, YAML hell these days. Anything like that. It's kind of my IDE of choice these days. And I am not a developer. I write some code here and there, but I'm not a programmer necessarily. So it's a very cool tool. The plugins are awesome. They have plugins to manage OpenShift. They have plugins directly into the Tecton pipelines. Very, very nice integration for your team to be able to interact with the OpenShift environment. All right. So now we're going to take a look at the video. And Casey, can you post that link into the chat? I'm going to post the link in there just in case anybody has any issues seeing it. This is it. So here we go. We got about 10 minutes of a video, and we're going to watch them deploy ARO. Here we go.
My name is August Simonelli. I'm a field product manager within the Cloud Platform Business Unit at Red Hat. I work with customers around the world on BU-led technical engagement. Today, we are going to look at an exciting option for deploying OpenShift into the public cloud, Red Hat OpenShift Managed Services. In this demonstration, we're looking specifically at Azure Red Hat OpenShift. Let's get started. Simply log in with your Red Hat account at cloud.redhat.com. Once in, you'll find many options to interact with Red Hat software. So let's go ahead and open up the Red Hat Cluster Manager to begin. Azure Red Hat OpenShift is jointly engineered, operated, and supported by Microsoft and Red Hat with an integrated support experience. It's available as an Azure first-party service, bringing true integration and innovation. So when clicking the Try It on Azure link from the OpenShift Cluster Manager, you're taken to detailed instructions to quickly get a production-grade OpenShift cluster standing up on Azure. And it's these instructions that we'll be following in this demonstration. Before we can actually start creating our cluster in Azure, we need to make sure of a few things. First, make sure Azure Red Hat OpenShift is available in your region. You'll also need to make sure you have a pay-as-you-go account, not the free entry-level account, and that you have enough quota for the standard DS-V3 family of vCPUs. The initial quotas allowed are 10 vCPUs. You'll need at least 40. So just use the normal Azure process to request larger quota for that instance type, and possibly for other instance types you might want to experiment with. Also, go ahead and get your OpenShift pull secret. If you don't have it, it's easy to find it from the Red Hat OpenShift Cluster Manager and to just download to your local machine. Now it's time to prep Azure for our installation. First, we have to register the required resource providers against our subscription. Resource providers provide granular access to Azure's resources. So in general, you register a provider only when you need it. Registration configures your subscription to work with each provider. Some resource providers are registered by default. Some are registered manually in advance, like we're doing here. And other resource providers are registered automatically when you take certain actions that require them. OpenShift on Azure install uses all types. So for OpenShift on Azure, we're registering the Red Hat OpenShift resource provider, Microsoft's compute, storage, and authorization resource providers. We could, of course, do this via the Azure portal through the UI, but it's really easy with the CLI, so we just do it here. Well, to be totally truthful, we're actually going to do the whole install from the CLI. So let's set some environment variables to make sure nothing gets set wrong. Okay, let's make this thing. First, we create a resource group. In Azure, a resource group is a logical group in which Azure resources are deployed and managed. We have to set a location for this. This location is where resource group metadata is stored and sets the default location for resources if we don't explicitly set them in the future. Now we're going to set up the networking for our cluster. So we're going to create a virtual network, which is going to have two empty subnets. One will be for the control plane and one will be for the workers. And we build all this networking inside of the resource group we talked about earlier. And next we build out the subnets. We're also explicitly setting a service endpoint, and that's because Azure guarantees a secure and direct route when we do that. Lastly, we need to disable the subnet private endpoint policies for that master subnet. This is required for the service to be able to connect to and manage the cluster, and if we were using the portal to do it, it would be the default. You can read more in the documentation. Now we're almost ready to create our cluster, and we're going to use a really cool command for this. It's the ARO create command. And I just want to show some of the things it can do through the help. You can set your VM sizes, you can set things about your networks, you can set things around worker sizing. It can do a lot. So it's a really clever command. So now we go ahead and build the cluster. We specify the resource group, the name of the cluster, the virtual network, and the two subnets we created, and I'm referencing my pull secret. And with that, it begins. In my region, installation took about 35 to 40 minutes. You can track it via the console in Azure, or you could use the debug command and you could watch it on the CLI. But in general, it was completely hands-off, and I had a coffee, and when I came back, it was done. And once the cluster is reporting complete, we now need to connect to it, so we use another cool ARO command to retrieve the details for the cluster. But one thing to note here is that we could have used our own domain name with the -- domain flag on the AZARO create command, and then we would just set it up in our own DNS. Here we actually have a random URL to connect to our cluster. And there you have it. With OpenShift on Azure, you have full cluster admin access for advanced customization and management. This gives you full control over upgrades and lifecycle management. You also get a direct integration into things like Azure Storage, into compute, the ability to have scalable machine sets, everything. Everything's multi-AZ, so you're getting just total control of your cluster. And of course, logging in from a command line, just as easy. Another cool integration with Azure is being able to configure Azure Red Hat OpenShift version 4 with container insights. And as you see here, Azure has found our cluster and has registered it as unmonitored. So let's go ahead and set that up. Okay, so what we're going to do is set up monitoring via Azure Red Hat OpenShift with container insights. Microsoft provides a script to set this up easily. Details on where and how to download are in the documentation. So you set your resource ID, your resource group, and your cluster name, and then you run the script, which does all the work for you. One thing I should point out is you do need your CLI to have access to Bash 4, Helm needs to be installed, and the OC command. But like I said, the script takes you through everything. It authenticates, performs all the setup, creates a namespace as required until you've got a working logging setup, which we'll take a look at in a minute. I'll go ahead and speed this up. Once the script ran, the cluster was instantly monitored. You can see you go right back in and it's a monitored cluster. And then you've got all the various dashboards that you might need. Now, my cluster took 5 minutes to start gathering data. I've advanced this a little bit further so we can go ahead and take a look at the amazing amount of data that's being collected here. Insights is pretty cool. You can really dig right into the components of your OpenShift cluster. I mean, you can query things. You can get right down to the root of what's going on there. It's pretty spectacular and absolutely worth trying out. And finally, deleting a cluster is as easy as creating one. Just a simple command, AZ, ARO, delete. When the command finishes, it took about 15 minutes in my region, the entire resource group and all the resources inside it, including the cluster, will be deleted. As you can see, Azure Red Hat OpenShift is pretty cool. It's an Azure first-party service, jointly engineered, managed, and supported by Red Hat and Microsoft. It inherits all of Azure's compliance and allows you to use your Azure billing. Deploying OpenShift onto Azure it's easy, is fast, and provides a completely managed service that allows you to focus on your applications first. And best of all, Azure Red Hat OpenShift is available now in your Azure account. Go give it a try. And thanks for your time today. Bye.
Okay, that was a nice little video. I have personally built this Azure ARO. I couldn't even tell you how many times I've done it. I mean, just in testing, and it is literally that easy. It's easy peasy, really. Okay, so obviously, again, we're going to try to increase the operational efficiency, right? So we're going to offload your platform management to the experts, right? So with ARO Managed Services, Red Hat and Microsoft take care of deploying and managing, updating, and all that stuff so that you can focus on your business. Again, it's all about offloading, right? That's the point of the managed service. It's the point of using a system like this so that you can just do what you need to do and not worry about being the platform guys. So a little bit about the Kubernetes day 1, day 2 stuff. This is kind of a stumbling issue, right? A stumbling block for a lot of customers when it comes to dealing with Kubernetes. Does your team know how to do this, right? Do you have the people who can work that out and actually make it work? This is problematic for most folks. Again, we don't even know what we don't know about new technology. So it really does come into more of an issue when it comes to how do I figure this out, right? So the integrated support and operations aspects are really kind of key, right? So, we have the relationship between Microsoft and Red Hat for this particular solution is pretty tight. So it's not going to be a situation of, Microsoft says it's Red Hat's fault and Red Hat says it's Microsoft's fault. They have already worked out how they deal with this stuff. And as you can see in this particular diagram, they're effectively one guy from Microsoft, one guy from Red Hat as a team. I don't know if that's actually, what it is, but it's something to that effect, right? And I have dealt with customers who have dealt with support, and that's never been the particular issue when it comes to dealing with ARO and any type of functionality. All right, so hybrid cloud flexibility, kind of important that we're capable of being flexible when it comes to hybrid clouds. That's the whole point of them. With OpenShift, you can easily scale your environment. And this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier with the burstability. You can scale it to whatever you need. And as the video demonstrated, if you're in the whatever region you're in, you have multi-region support, right? So there's region 1, 2, and 3, and OpenShift will automatically deploy into multi-regional support. Of course, if that's what you want it to do, it will automatically do that stuff. Nothing that you need to worry about. So these are a couple of methods of how ARO helps bring that flexibility into a hybrid environment. So this is kind of like the on-prem workloads talking to ARO. And one of the ways that this works with ARO is the express route into the VPN through the Azure vent. And so you can see on this thing, you have your data center, then you have the Azure Express route, and that brings you right into the Azure Management Plane and the OpenShift VNet environment and all that kind of stuff. So that is all managed for you. You don't have to figure out how to do that, right? The next is how can ARO talk from one cluster to the other, right? So you have a North America cluster in this one, or Northern Europe, you have a Western Europe. Everybody's in their availability zones. Everything's copacetic by itself, but you want these two to be able to talk to each other. And this is done through appearing vents, which is something that Azure supports, right? So again, this is functionality that's already there. You don't have to do anything to build this or to manage this. This happens as part of the Azure hyperscaler functionality. And the third is, a little bit of a scarier solution, but it is kind of tying these two clusters together, right? And so this uses Submariner to create an IPsec tunnel across the two clusters, and it kind of effectively turns it into a single cluster. I mean, not really, but effectively it can turn it into a single cluster. And obviously this is kind of a complicated build out environment. And I would say that if you were trying to do this on your own, I mean, I have worked at large companies before. I worked at Turner, I worked at PayPal, and we used to do this stuff before there was hyperscalers. Let me tell you, it's challenging. And I can imagine trying to do it between hyperscalers because they don't really play with each other so great. But OpenShift brings you this functionality, particularly in the ARO particular environment. All right, so I think that we're going to step back to Nick, and he's going to talk a little bit about our Kubernetes Center of Excellence and how Shadowsoft can bring value to your ARO Azure OpenShift experience.
Thanks, Grant.
Thank you.
So we'll get through this pretty quick and then get you out of here so you can move on with your day. I'm sure everybody's got things to do. So Grant, can you go to the next slide? So we actually just released yesterday what we call our Kubernetes Center of Excellence. And I'm going to briefly tell you about why that matters. So we've been helping customers with their Kubernetes journey for the last 4 to 5 years. And through the dozens of engagements we've had with customers, we've found out that we're running into the same challenges. And So we've basically built a solution around that. So the Kubernetes Center of Excellence is broken into what we would call these 5 pillars of value. And it starts with a comprehensive health assessment. So if you're greenfield to Kubernetes, this would be the planning and understanding your infrastructure and understanding your tools and basically getting prepared to make that move to Kubernetes. If you're already in Kubernetes, but you know maybe you're not doing everything to best practice, or there's a lack of knowledge, we'll go through there and identify those areas and build a plan around how to remediate those things for you. And that rolls into what we call operations playbooks. So you have to address each group within a Kubernetes deployment. So operations needs to keep these things healthy, needs to understand the limits and controls to be able to work with other teams cross-functionally. So we build these plays. It's a collaborative effort with your team to be able to continue to support your implementation in a way where it's just not always on fire. So we work with developing that plan, implementing that plan with you, keeping up with cluster updates, any patching that needs to get done. We'll basically help the operations team get comfortable with the idea of managing Kubernetes. Then we have to go over to the development side. So we call this developer guidance. We can get the Kubernetes operations running well, but if we're not building applications with the construct of Kubernetes in mind, it's not going to matter how everything's configured. It could explode. So there's actually a true method of learning between operations and application development, where the guardrails around what we would like to see, living in containers, living on these clusters, are actually really important and require communication. So, I don't like using the buzzwords here, but this is the true intent of the DevOps culture, right? Operations and development have to work together. One way of why this is difficult with Kubernetes is because it's no longer an option. Those silos have to be broken down. So we help educate development on, here are the best practices we want to see based on the infrastructure that's available to you, and create this working relationship there. The fourth step or pillar is focused around observability. So we, will take your own investments around monitoring tools and help you set up health checks, look for trends in cluster health, making sure that things are humming along the way they should be. And that is a constant engagement from our team. And then the fifth pillar is what we call our Kubernetes Academy. So this is currently in beta, but this was actually born out of a program that we did pre-pandemic, where we brought in newly minted engineers out of the university, and we took them through an internship with about 12 to 15 weeks with a capstone, so they could learn the tools of the trade. You learn a lot of great foundational or theoretical knowledge in formal training through university, but the practical tools, not so much. So we basically put 50 somewhat people through the program over a few years, and some of those people work on our staff today, which is really cool. All the other ones have landed in great jobs in the Atlanta area, as contributing engineers, and really helped kind of boost their way along. So we're reimagining this as a coursework and instructional videos around how to do Kubernetes. So we think knowledge is the biggest gap here. There's so many ways, so many products, so many operators you could use. Providing that roadmap and guidance around that is really, really important. And upskilling our teams is usually the biggest challenge. So we see those as a continuum of this cycle. Grant, if you could go to the next slide, this is how we visualize it. It's these pillars, and it doesn't really stop, right? We don't ever stop learning. We don't really have exact proficiency. This landscape is changing, so we're continually learning, and then we're spreading that knowledge to our customers. Grant, if you can go to the next one. So on our website, if you go there, there's a heading. It's Kubernetes. It's the first one, and there's a landing page for our Kubernetes Center of Excellence. And this is an example of some materials that we have for download that you can leverage to boost your education, understand more about the program. There's even a pitch deck that you can use internally. If you're identifying this is something that our organization needs, take that pitch deck and slap it in, slap your logo on it and go present this to your management. We'll also help with that too. So these are meant to be tools for you to explore, to see if any of these concepts resonate. All the things that we've built into this program is based on customer feedback. We've asked, a range from smaller customers to large enterprises. What are the things you struggle with? And what we're finding is the things we're addressing in our 5 pillars for our Center of Excellence are all the same things that all these organizations are challenged with today. Grant, if you could go to the next. Oh, we're here. We're in the thank you section. So appreciate everyone's time. I'm going to look real quick. Grant, do you see the chat? I think we had a couple questions pop in here.
We did, and I wanna to talk about that in just a minute, because it's more the one question that I got about the AKS is it's more than just what I answered in the chat. So we'll talk about that briefly. And now it's open. We're here till 12:30, so people can ask questions and all that kind of stuff. As far as I'm concerned, if that's copacetic with everybody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just to kick this off, the question was, what is the difference? What is the reason to use ARO instead of AKS? Because with AKS, you have all the same benefits and features and blah, 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 blah. Technically, that is true. So that is the case for any of them. So, AKS, EKS, GKE, all of them. All of those services that the hyperscalers provide, it's Kubernetes with their own wrapper around it, right? So it's not naked Kubernetes, right? It's not like you installed Kubernetes on your own thing. So it's kind of a competitor with OpenShift to a certain extent. The difference is OpenShift is portable, right? So let's just think about that for a second. AKS is not portable. It runs on Azure's hyperscaler cloud, period. That's it. It runs there and it runs everywhere that they run. But if you decide that I don't want to use Amazon, or I don't want to use Azure anymore, I want to use Amazon, or I want to use Google too, well, now you have a problem, because AKS is not going to run on Google's platform. So now you have to rewrite all your applications to work on Google's platform. And it's going to be different. It's Kubernetes, but all of their services, their storage interfaces, their networking interfaces, their load balancers, their ingress, their service mesh. I mean, the laundry list goes on and on. Every single one of those services is different between the hyperscalers. This is how Red Hat, or particularly OpenShift, addresses this. You put OpenShift down, and now everywhere that you're running OpenShift, it's the same thing. Your developers write their code, and it runs everywhere you put OpenShift with no changes by you. So if you have an OpenShift environment in Azure, and you have one in Amazon or in Google, the setup underneath OpenShift is going to be different to accommodate those different platforms. But from OpenShift up, what your developer experiences is the same thing. Your operations team experiences the same, your development experience is the same, and your management experience is the same. So that's the big plus to using ARO. There's also a ROSA option, which is Red Hat OpenShift on Amazon. And then there's OpenShift Dedicated, which is managed OpenShift on Google. So they got you covered. However consumption model you want to use, you can do it with some type of managed offering through Red Hat.
And another thing to consider, and I'm going to go a little higher here because I'm not as smart as Grant, but the OpenShift offering comes with a considerable amount of tools, right? So yeah, you can use the native services with your cloud provider if you want to run their version of managed Kubernetes. But OpenShift really leans more towards a platform than anything, right? So there's a huge advantage to that if you're looking for a thoughtful solution that is considering all the components you may need. And that's where I really think OpenShift shines in general. If you want to build the car yourself, that's fine, but that takes time and you got to have resources. ARO is really focused around how do we get something going today? That's the huge benefit of any of the managed offerings with OpenShift on the hyperscalers is how quickly you can go today.
Mhm.
Back to you, Grant.
Yeah. No, you're right. I didn't talk about all the components. I mean, that's a whole nother presentation, all the bits and pieces you need to put around Kubernetes so that you can actually do stuff. And some of the stuff that's kind of key are things like the service mesh or the ingress routing and stuff like that. Without getting into all those nuts and bolts, let's just suffice it to say, without those two functions that come natively in OpenShift, you're not running containers inside a Kubernetes environment. And with most other kind of Kubernetes wrapper situations, you have to buy that third party, or you use something that may or may not work for you. Another big plus to OpenShift or to Red Hat products in particular is the fact that they're open source. If you want to make a change to the way it works, you can do that, right? You can change it. If you want to make a change to the way that Amazon does something in their environment, you can go pound sand because they're not changing anything for you, right? You can change your application, but it's not going to change the way that their system works. Whereas with OpenShift, if you don't like the way something works, you can change it. You can write your own operator and install your own version of that particular thing. If you are so inclined to do so, you have the functionality. Again, that's more advanced, but a lot of customers that use things like Lambda or serverless, most of the time they use that stuff to fix problems in Amazon or Google or something like that, right? They use it as a way to glue kind of things together. So with OpenShift, because it has a full stack of everything you need, a lot of that stuff, you don't spend as much time writing glue and writing, stuff to get you over a hump or do something that you don't like the way that Azure does it. And so you write your own or kind of thing like that, right? Again, the point is to get away from that and get into an environment that actually allows you to do this stuff. OpenShift comes with Istio by default, and you don't have to pay for it. It's the Red Hat version, Red Hat branded version, I guess you'd say, of Istio. But you can put in whatever you want. I've installed third-party service meshes for customers in their OpenShift environment. OpenShift, again, Red Hat doesn't care. They provide you with one. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. You can use your own. Doesn't cause any problems. Of course, you can't run both. So I don't know if exactly Envoy is supported. I'm assuming that it probably is. So far, I haven't seen anything that's not supported with OpenShift when it comes to things like service mesh. Yeah. Any other questions? Graphing and Prometheus. Yes, OpenShift does use Prometheus itself. And of course, oh yeah, sorry, somebody already answered that question. Or do we have any other? What do you have to pay Azure account to get started?
So just as an aside, if this is something interesting to your organization, talk to us about it. Reach out to us because we have promotions and funding that can help with pilots, subsidize engagements to get you started to do a pilot within your organization. Obviously, the upfront cost around ARO is relatively limited, right? You're not buying an annual subscription right now. So this is a great way to go prove the use case. This is something that we help customers with all the time. So let us know. We also, we have limited funding quarter to quarter where we can apply that towards a use case. So, reach out to us, let us know how we can do that. Grant would be very involved in that process. So we can help out that way. And then as far as, getting started, like if you were going to, start with an ARO subscription, we can help with that. We are a gold partner with Microsoft. We carry a CSP. So we could get you started very, very quickly in hours with a quick agreement, and you'd be off to the races. So we'd love to help you out with that. So let us know if that's of interest to you.